I'd been a babysitter for years, working with several different companies and hundreds of families. This was just another job on a Thursday night. I drove to the house, getting there exactly on time, and met the parents. They were having a date night at a concert downtown and would be gone for 5 to 6 hours. It was 6:30 already, so this was a late job. They introduced me to their son, Jay, who was 10. He was very talkative and seemed to enjoy my company. When the parents left, he was excited to show me his video games and have me be his audience while he played. He played for around 2 hours before I started getting hungry. I let him continue playing in the living room while I made something to eat in the kitchen. I spent maybe 5 minutes heating up a meal, but then all of a sudden when I got back, Jay was different. He wasn't talking anymore, and he seemed to really shy. I tried starting up conversations, but he just nodded. I didn't want to be bothering him about it too much, so I pretended like nothing was wrong and watched him play some more. Once 9:30 came around, I told him it was time for bed and made sure he got ready. He was still acting weird, trying to avoid me and delay going to bed for as long as possible. Finally, just before 10, he got in bed. I went downstairs and sat on the couch. I was replaying the whole night in my head, wondering what went wrong, but there really didn't seem to be anything I did. I left him alone for a few minutes while I made food, and then it was like he just flipped a switch. While I was thinking on the couch, I heard Jay upstairs. He was walking down the hallway and then opened a door. I quickly went upstairs to see what he was doing, but he wasn't in the hallway. I opened the door to his room, and there he was, sitting in his bed just as I left him. "What are you doing, Jay?" I asked nicely. He looked scared of me. After no response, I just decided to let it go and began walking out the door, but then he said to me he had to use the bathroom. I said okay and let him go down the hall, but while he was in there, I took a look around his room. It all looked like an ordinary 10-year-old boy's room. Just as I was walking out, I noticed something in the corner of my eye. I looked over, and right by the closet, I could see someone's eye looking back at me through the crack in the door. I hesitated, then walked out of the room and closed the door. I listened and didn't hear any movement in the room. As soon as Jay came out of the bathroom, I told him to be quiet and rushed him downstairs and into my car. I dialed 911, and as we waited for them to show up, I asked Jay if he knew someone else was in the house. He was quiet, not responding to me at all. When the first officer came, he went right inside and caught the man walking around upstairs. He looked like a 30-year-old creep. When questioned, the man said he was a friend of Jay's and that Jay even let him in the house to babysit for the night. Strangely, when the parents got home, they basically pushed me away and didn't give me any more updates on what happened. There was obviously something really weird going on, because Jay was very scared of him. I don't know if they knew each other or if this was a first-time encounter, but I hope it was all dealt with well by the police. When I was 14, it was the summer of 2012. I was looking for a job. My grandma had told me about a family that she was friends with, and they had 2 boys, Alexander and Danny. Alexander was 10 and Danny was 5. I was very excited to have a summer job and get some extra spending money. I went over to meet the family with my grandma, and they were friendly enough. The 2 boys seemed easy to handle and not babyish or whiny at all. In fact, the boys and I were playing with their trucks, getting along great. I set up a date with the parents, and they actually had a dinner to go to the next night. So the next night it became time for me to head over to the house. It was a humid, rainy night. I walked into the house and the parents were just getting ready to leave. They gave me a paper with rules and such, things they didn't want the kids to do, and their routines. They wrote a little something on the side that said, "Danny swears he hears tapping on his window every night, but not to believe it, because they think it's just a silly story that kids make up." I was only 14 myself, so reading this was a little unnerving, but I sort of forgot about it. It was a chill night. We watched TV and played with toys. They didn't give me any sort of trouble, but when I told the boys it was time to get ready for bed, I noticed Danny starting to stall and get kind of distressed. I ignored it, thinking he's only 5 and probably wants to stay up later. Eventually, I got them both to settle down and go to sleep. About an hour and a half had passed. It was now 10 p.m. I heard Danny groggily but loudly yell for me. I rushed up to him and asked what was the matter. He told me he heard the tapping noise again. I instantly felt uneasy and nervous, but I just flicked on the light and looked out the window. Nothing outside except darkness and the solar lights from the neighbor's driveway. I calmly told Danny that it was probably just some bugs since it's summer after all. He seemed to come at ease when I said this and laid back down. As I walked out of the room to shut his door, I heard a faint tap noise against his window. I got the chills as I flicked on the light again and looked out the window. And again, nothing. I kept telling myself that it was just bugs flying into the window, but something deep down told me to do something. I told Danny not to worry as I opened the window and yelled out, "This is private property, I'm going to call the police." Moments after I did so, I heard a frantic scurrying into the forest that was across the yard. By now, I must have had goosebumps all along my arms and legs, and I immediately called the police for real. I called the parents right after, and they were thankfully already on their way home. The police arrived and didn't seem at all surprised by what I had told them. They had gotten other reports in the area for quite some time about some stranger going up to people's windows at night, looking through them and tapping on them. They said they got calls telling them the same thing almost every week. Danny's parents just never believed him, and I guess took it as some little kid's story or imagination, but it turned out to be very real. They searched the whole neighborhood and never found the person. After that night, I told the family in the nicest way possible that I didn't feel comfortable watching their kids anymore. And I still think to this day what would have happened if anything went differently. Like, God forbid, the window was unlocked or open. Maybe sometimes parents shouldn't just brush whatever their young children say as just their imagination. When I was 16, my parents made me get a job. The only thing that caught my attention was babysitting. I had younger cousins that I enjoyed being around, so I thought it wouldn't be so bad. There was a company in my town that I applied for, and after a short interview, they took some pictures of me and had me fill out a bio of who I was. Then they posted me on their website as a babysitter. I waited. A few weeks went by and still nobody had booked me. My parents told me to be patient, but I was already looking for other jobs. Until one day, I finally got a notification. Someone booked me for a full night and morning, meaning I would have to spend the night there and continue watching them in the morning. It was on a Saturday, so I didn't have school, but spending the night somewhere else felt strange to me. I arrived at the house at the door by the dad who invited me in. He was an older man, in his late 50s, I bet, but he told me his daughter was only 4 years. He showed me to the kitchen, where he had me sit at the table with him and talk to me for a good 25 minutes. He asked me all about myself. I wasn't sure if this was normal or not for parents to do when hiring a new babysitter, but I went along with it. At some point, I realized I hadn't met or even seen his daughter yet, so I asked where she was. He said she was upstairs in her room sleeping and that I wouldn't have to worry about watching her until the morning. Then he got up abruptly and said he had to go and would be back around 11 tomorrow morning. He stepped out and left me the key to the house. I remember feeling very confused about the whole situation. None of it felt like I thought it would. The first thing I did after he left was walk around the bottom floor. I forgot to ask where I was supposed to sleep, or if there was food for me to make, or any games for us to play. Probably all questions experienced babysitters would have asked right away. As I walked around, I began wondering where all the kids' stuff was. He said his daughter was 4, so I expected a mess of toys all over the house, but there wasn't a single toy in sight. I even checked in a few drawers that looked like they might have some, but there weren't any. The fridge and cabinets didn't seem to have much kid food either. I realized this was off to a really bad start, and I just needed to relax. I decided I would text the dad in the morning and ask him about the food and stuff, but for now I would just make myself a spot on the couch pillow, then turned off the lights. I tried to sleep for nearly 2 hours, but there was something off about the house that just kept me up. Then, at 1 a.m., I heard something click on the other side of the house. I shot up and looked across the room. The whole house was quiet now. I was sitting up for a minute until I heard the back door softly slide open. My heart was pounding as I got up and went to the hallway that had a clear view of the back door. I was confused to see the dad with his back to me while he was trying to softly close the door behind him. I believe this moment that I had to process everything before he saw me was likely the reason for my escape. As he turned and saw me, I started running for the front door. His footsteps followed behind me, rushing down the hallway and yelling at me to stop. I ran for my car and got in. The dad wasn't far behind, banging on my window as I backed out of the driveway. While running away was a smart decision, the next one wasn't so much. I didn't say anything about what happened. I think I was worried that I had done something wrong or messed up as a babysitter somehow. A month later, though, I finally told my parents and they said it was too late, but I should have reported it. It was an obvious red flag that the man didn't contact the babysitting company, practically showing that he was guilty of something. I'm sure there was no daughter and no reason for me to be there.